Hello, it's good to be back with you. We haven't had a chance to be together in quite some time, and so I thought it would be good maybe to start something back, maybe the middle of the week like this, where we can get together and just talk about a few things. So this morning, or today, whenever you're watching this, I'm going to be looking at John chapter 1. So if you have a Bible near you and want to go ahead and find it, then please do and have it ready, because we're going to come to that in just a few moments. I've been thinking, where in the world would we be without questions? Because questions seem to determine a lot of things in life for us, what doors we go through, what kind of opportunities that we have. So people will ask all kinds of things like, will you marry me? Or what am I going to do with my life? Or how much does this job pay? Tell me about the tumor. Is it malignant? How much longer do I have to live? Those are important questions for us and questions that we ask. I have heard people say over the years, somewhat half-jokingly, but I also think it's partially half true, that they'll say, whenever I get to heaven, I'm going to ask God, and then you can fill in the blank with whatever it is. And there are a lot of questions that we have that we want to ask God. We'd like to know. But I started thinking, what about the opposite of that? What about questions that God might have for us? There are a number of them, really starting at the very beginning of the Bible. First book of the Bible, the first question that God asks is, Adam, where are you? And then the next question has to do with Cain and Abel, and he says, where is Abel your brother? And then that response so famous that says, am I my brother's keeper? Well, God would continue to ask questions to people. When Elijah was afraid for his life and made his way to Sinai, God asked him, Elijah, what are you doing here? Or when Isaiah was caught up in this vision of being in heaven, and there was a worship time, and God was asking those who were there, whom shall I send and who will go for us? Or the time when he asked Saul, Saul, why is it that you're persecuting me? So God has been asking us questions for a long time. There are two books in my library here at church. One of them is by Trevor Hudson, who is a pastor in South Africa. And the title of his book, came out a couple of years ago, is Questions That God Asks Us. So some of those questions that I just mentioned a moment ago are questions that he covers in his book. An older book that I have is one by Roger Lovett, who is a pastor here in the South. And he asked, the title of his book is Questions That Jesus Raised. And so I thought, that would be kind of a good thing for us to talk about over the next few weeks, some of those questions that Jesus raised. So I want to bounce off of this, and to do so, especially out of the book of John. And so we come to this passage in John chapter 1, and I'm going to begin reading with verse 35, if you have it there. This is early in Jesus' ministry, and John the Baptist has just talked about Jesus being the Messiah, so that's the setting. Verse 35, the next day John was there again, and two of his disciples. When he saw Jesus passing by, he said, look, the Lamb of God. When the two disciples heard him say this, they followed Jesus. Turning around, Jesus saw them following, and he asked, what do you want? And they said, Rabbi, which means teacher, where are you staying? Come, he replied, and you will see. And so they went and saw where he was staying, and he spent the day with them. It was about 4 p.m. Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, was one of the two who had heard what John had said and who had followed Jesus. The first thing that Andrew did was to find his brother Simon and tell him, we have found the Messiah, that is, the Christ. And he brought him to Jesus. Jesus looked at him and said, you are Simon, son of John. You will be called Cephas, which will be translated into Peter. And so the very first question that John has for us in the Bible is when he asks that question, what do you want? What are you looking for? That's a good question, and it's a great first question, because it pushed these early disciples, and it pushes us too, to think about what is it that's really important in our lives? What is it that we want to build our lives around? What is it that's really critical? Richard Rohr has written a book entitled Falling Forward, and I thought I had it right here. And it's an intriguing book. It's about these two halves of life that we have. And he talks about how in the first half of our life, we will spend it trying to establish our identity, maybe climbing the ladder of success, investing in a career and in relationships, in achievements, in performance, in security, success. We will invest our lives into bringing all of those things together because those things give us a sense of security. And then he says the challenges that we meet after that or during that, maybe some of the mistakes that we make, the suffering that we might have to go through, all of those sort of work together to cause us to begin to ask the question, is there more than this? Or is this all there is? And when we begin to grapple with those kinds of questions, then he says it leads us into the second part of our life. Not anything that has to do with chronology. It can happen at any time. But in that second part of life, it is the focus is different. It is, what are we going to do with those things that we have acquired, with those things that we have been trying to accumulate, those things that we have invested in? Now, what are we going to do? And that's really where the journey begins. And there is a different answer, I think, at that point to that question of what is it that you want? I really have to say that the answer in that question, what is it that you want, what do you want, is going to be different. The answer is going to be different depending on which phase it is that we are in life. I think it's kind of sad that there are many people who really never move out of that first phase. That our identity, our achievements, our relationships, our accumulations, our security, all of those things drive us until we die. And that's pretty sad, because that's an example of people that Rohr would say really have never left home. So what do you want? That's the question that Jesus asks. It's a good question. I want to be happy. I want a spouse. I want to have kids. I want to have a good job. I want to be promoted. I want more money. I'd like to have a better body. I want to be number one. I want to have people to agree with me. All of those things are what we would call the first half of life kinds of stuff. What do you want? People who become Christians early in life often are people who say, I'm looking for some security. I want heaven. Maybe I want just enough religion to get by. I don't want to change my plans. I want to be able to be accepted by my family, by my church. That's why I'm making this decision. And maybe even would say, I want to get everything I can from God. Those are all first half kinds of things. So Jesus, I think, caught these people off guard whenever they asked him, what do you want? And they didn't know what to say. Well, how do you respond to that? Have you ever been in a situation like that where you just didn't know what to say? And so instead of answering Jesus' question, the disciples instead responded this way. They said, where are you staying? That's the same invitation. And then Jesus says, come and see. It's the same invitation that was given to Moses and to Adam and to Elijah and all of these people in the Old Testament. You come and decide for yourself. And it would be an amazing discovery. They would see water turn to wine. They would see people healed, prostitutes who were forgiven, thousands of people who would be fed. It really would be a great journey. And at the end of John's book, this is what he writes. These things are written so that you may believe in Jesus, the Christ, the Son of God, and in believing that you might have life in his name. Those early disciples found a lot more on this journey than where Jesus was staying. They found life, and they found forgiveness, and they found hope, and they found healing. Jesus' invitation was simple. Come and see. Over my time as pastor here at Monte Vista, I have had a number of telephone conversations with people in the community who would call, especially in those early years when I first came here. They would call and they would ask, what is it that you believe about this? Or how do you interpret that? Or where does your church stand on this? Or what do you do about that? So I would try the best I could to answer their question very honestly, but then I would always end it by saying, why don't you just come and see? Now, I don't think anybody ever took me up on that offer, but it was the invitation. The way you're going to know is by coming and seeing. And so I want to challenge you over this next week to reflect on this question that Jesus asked these early disciples, and that is, what do you want? What is it that you really want? When I was 7 years old, I made the decision that I was going to follow Jesus Christ. I don't remember a lot of the details. I remember some of them, but I don't remember maybe the motives behind it or some of my thinking. But if I had to guess, I would say that the decision I made was based on a lot of those first half of life issues and decisions. I wanted to be accepted. I wanted to be baptized like my friends were being baptized. I wanted to avoid pain. I didn't want to go to hell. I wanted to go to heaven. I also wanted some security. I wanted a place to belong, and I wanted people to feel like that I wanted to feel like I was part of a family, not just my family, but this larger family of Christ. I wanted a place to belong. Whatever it was that motivated me, I accepted that invitation at that point to say, Jesus, I want to come and see. And now if you were to ask me, what do you want? My answer would be very different than what it was then. What is it that I want? And I know this sounds simplistic, but it's important to me. I want to be like Jesus because I find in him a way of life that I have not found anywhere else. It is a way of life that has purpose and has joy. It has a community with it. I don't find that with any other religious leader, with any other belief, with any other system. Jesus gave us insight into God and into people and into the way we live that I've never found anywhere else. And I want to follow that, and I want to be like he was. I also want to reveal the God that he revealed. A God who was kind and who was loving and who was compassionate and who was forgiving. A God who loved unconditionally. That's important to me. Jesus did that beautifully, better than anyone else ever has. He was that true revelation of God. And he did that with every encounter that he had. That's what I want as well. I want to be known for love, for being accepting, for being welcoming, and for including all people. Because I believe we really do need each other. I also believe that there is room in this world for all of us, and we need that. We need to learn from each other. We need to grow from each other. We need to minister to each other. We need to live together as one. That's important. And so I would also say, like St. Francis would say, God, make me an instrument of your peace, because that's what I want too. I want to be a part of the solution. I want to be a part of peace and reconciliation in this world. I've spent the first half of my life building my life, and I have no regrets for that whatsoever. It has been a wonderful, terrific life. When I accepted Jesus Christ at 7, I also accepted that invitation to come and see, and I did. And I discovered in that process that there's more to it than just believing the right things or maybe saying the right words. It's much more than that. It is living this life. And so, what do I want? I want to keep growing. I want to keep learning, especially learning how to love. And I want to bear the fruit of God's Spirit. We've been talking about that on Sunday. And every time I come to one of those fruits, those dimensions of fruit, I say, I want that in my life. I want that in my life. And that's what I want. So, a good question for you this week is to think about this. What do you want? It's not the question I raise, it's the question Jesus raises and asks us. What do you want? Think about that this week, and then the middle of next week we're going to get together and look at another question that Jesus asks us. Until then, I hope you have a great week.